Hi guys and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be a wrap up of the 8 books that I read between May and June. I have just filmed another video wearing this outfit, so I'm not sure which one's going to go up first, probably this one. So if in my next video you see me wearing the same outfit, it's because I filmed them on the same day. Without further ado, let's talk about the books that I read. So the first book that I read in May was Fallen by Karin, which is the 5th book in a series that she's written with a main character called Will Trent, and I think there's about 10 books in that series. I did read the first 4 books quite a few years ago and I was enjoying them, but I much prefer the Grant County series, which is set before the Will Trent series. And it has a couple of characters that like crossover. I started reading Fallen a few years ago and I was just not in the mood to carry it on, and then next thing I know I'm in Tesco's and I see this book called The Silent Wife by Karin. I talked about it in my recent haul video, I think. Nothing on this book said that it was a sequel or that part of a series, so I bought it thinking it was a standalone. Lo and behold, it was actually the 10th book in the series, so I thought I would pick it back up where I left off and give it another shot. One positive thing about this series is that I picked it up and I didn't feel like I had to reread the other 4 before I got to that book. They are all kind of like, I think you could read them as standalones because she does a really good job of summarising what happened in the previous books so that you don't feel completely lost. I ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 purely because I did like it and I miss Karin writing, so I always enjoy going back to it, but I just found it okay. The ending, I don't know, I just didn't really care for it that much, but it was all okay. I probably will continue the series because I do like the characters, but it didn't really hold up against all the other thrillers that I've read. All I can say is that it was okay. Like, I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't recommend you like go out and immediately pick up this book or this series, you know? But I'm gonna stick with it, so I will let you know how I find the next books in the series, like over the next few months or whatever. Also, I've actually so I keep like a journal of all the books that I read and like my notes on like how I found them and stuff, and I've just noticed that there was like a big gap in my reading between like April and May, and I was wondering like what was I doing. Like, I didn't read anything for like 2 weeks. It was actually because I tried to read The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead and I ended up DNFing it at about 65%, which I think is totally unheard of for me. I would never like read this far into a book and then give it up, but it just really wasn't for me. I thought the concept would be really exciting and like full of action because it's about this girl called Cora and she's living on a slave plantation, and the Underground Railroad is like a physical train track that people can use to like escape slavery. It's very difficult to do and there's a lot of risk about getting caught. People notice that you've gone missing and you've still got to trek these like miles to actually get to these railroad stations in the first place. So I thought it would be a really interesting book, but I ended up just not enjoying it. I felt like I didn't care enough about the characters, but I also feel like it was written in a way that I wouldn't care. Things that were happening were told in like a few sentences, like someone could die in like a sentence and then it just moved on, and I found that I just didn't care about really what was happening. I also felt like a lot of it read like a non-fiction book, but I didn't like know if it was actually true or if that was part of like the fictional world that Colson Whitehead was creating. I felt like I was constantly rereading the paragraphs to like find out what was going on because I felt like I was just missing things so much because it was just over so quickly. It was, I don't know, I just found it really hard to understand and I did get bored after a couple of pages each time and just have to put it down. So I really just had no motivation to finish this book, but I did want to know what happened at the end. So I looked on Wikipedia, read the spoilers, and I was satisfied that if I have read that in the book, I would still not have, like, I feel like the book just didn't make me care enough. I feel like it would have been told in a way that I didn't feel anything from. So I'm pretty happy that I DNF'd that book, but I will read The Nickel Boys because I'm still intrigued by that book by the same author. So yeah, I thought I would just include that as a little thing that I didn't actually finish that book, but I did read 65% of it, so yeah. It's a shame I didn't like it. Next book I read was Sadie by Courtney, and I really liked this book. So Sadie follows a girl called Sadie who goes missing just after her younger sister is found brutally murdered in their small town. And we're following both from the perspectives of Sadie, like as she's ran away, and we're like following her journey as she's like on the run essentially, but we're also following a podcast at the same time. So the podcast host is trying to investigate Sadie's disappearance. I really love this book. It was really dark, but it was sort of like YA as well, so it was like older reader YA fiction, but it was really dark, and it was dark enough to satisfy me who loves a dark read. It felt really atmospheric, just everything about where Sadie came from, like living in this trailer park with her mum who wasn't the best mum, and as she's like traveling around America trying to find out what happened and like trying to find people, just everything about it was really well written. You felt like you were really on this journey with Sadie. My favourite perspective was Sadie's, because although I thought that it could easily be like really repetitive, because the podcast and Sadie were kind of talking about similar events, I thought they worked together really well, but I thought the podcast in itself was less interesting and tended to get repetitive within itself. And I also felt it was a bit like over dramatised. I've heard that people really liked the audiobook, so I feel like the podcast sections might work better as an audiobook, obviously because it's meant to be a podcast. Whereas reading them sometimes felt a bit like over dramatic. And I also really loved the ending. I feel like the ending might not satisfy a lot of other readers, but I felt like it worked really well in this case. Like as soon as I finished that book I was like, oh damn. So yeah, I really liked that one, and I gave it, what did I give it? So I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. I would highly recommend it if the premise sounds interesting to you. So the next two books that I read are kind of similar, but I was really in the mood to read some mystery thrillers that were to do with like teenage girls, friendship groups, something that reminded me of like Pretty Little Liars. I used to love that show when I was in school. I was in a bit of a reading slump after trying to read The Underground Railroad and after reading Fallen, which was like not great. So Sadie just put me in the mood to read some really like young adult but still intense thrillers. First up I read Little Monsters by Karin, and this book was about these three girls who are really good friends, and at the very start of the book they go to this like haunted house in their town. Yeah, something happens which like isn't very clear, and there's like some tension between the girls in their friendship group, and then one of the girls ends up going missing and the two other girls are sort of left to pick up the pieces and try and find out what's happened to her. I'd really liked this book when I was reading it, and it did feel very Pretty Little Liars vibes, which is what I was going in for. It had lots of like teen angst, which normally I don't really like, but I was in the mood for it then. So our main character is very angsty, very like quintessential teenager. There's lots of arguments and like secrets and things like that. So whilst I found it a fun read, in the end I just found it sort of okay. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. All I really remember about this book is the ending, and I wasn't like super enamoured with how it ended. I don't know, I just didn't care so much for it. I think I was hoping for a little more maybe, but I did find it an interesting and fun read, and it was definitely worth the read. And then the third book that I read in this like young adult thriller hype that I was on was Dangerous Girls by Abigail Haas, and this has quickly become one of my favourite books of the year. It's about a group of teenagers that are going on this spring break trip. They're all like seniors in high school, and it's sort of like their goodbye kind of trip before they all go on to college and do other things. And while we're on this trip, somebody dies. Our main character quickly becomes one of the prime suspects. It had a lot of like summery vibes because it's set in this really like hot location where they're all on holiday. I just loved the direction that this book went. It did remind me a little bit of like, you know, in Gone Girl, if you've read it or watched it, where Nick is being accused of Amy's murder, and there's all that pressure on him to like behave with the media and the police, and things are just getting taken like out of context, and it made me really angry to read about because it just felt so unfair on our main character that she was being blamed for this situation. There were a lot of parallels, I think, to Gone Girl, and it also sort of reminded me of Amanda Knox as well. It's just like a frustrating thing to read, but I really liked it. And the ending, I loved the ending. But again, it made me really like feel things, but for a completely different reason. Obviously I can't say without spoiling it, but this book just made me fuming at everything, but like in a really good way. So it made me like fuming for our main character, and then the ending just made me fuming. Yeah, I really liked this book. Also the writing, like the format of this book was really good because it jumped around in time a lot. So we're following the present day with our main character, we're following our main character on the spring break, like before the murder. Then we're also looking at like before they even went on a holiday, so what her friendship and her relationship was like when they were just at school, like before this holiday. There was just so much jumping around, but it was like perfect, like seamless. Everything just fit really well together, and there were no perspectives that were boring. All the chapters were really short, and just I was completely hooked the whole way through. So I would highly recommend that book. I think it would be perfect to read in summer because of all the summer vibes going on there. So yeah, highly recommend. Just to clarify, I did end up giving Dangerous Girls a 5 out of 5. So yeah, definitely one of my favourite like thriller type books this year. The next book I read after that was Call Me By Your Name by André Aciman, or Aciman, I'm not entirely sure how you say his name. It's been on my list for a long time. I've heard lots of good things. I was in the mood for like a romance. Again, it has perfect summer vibes because it's set in Italy during the summer. We're following Elio, who is this really like rich kid. His dad is an academic, and they are basically chilling out at this Italian villa for weeks at a time, where he does nothing but like read and sunbathe and go swimming and just do whatever he wants. And honestly, what a dream. It sounds like the best life. Every summer his dad invites, well, he actually like has applicants like apply to come and stay with them, and it will be from some like young and upcoming academic who will be like chosen to come and stay with the family. So they end up choosing this guy called Oliver, who Elio is quickly enamoured with, and we follow their like friendship, relationship throughout the time that he's in Italy, knowing full well that Oliver will soon be going back to America within like a couple of months. I have mixed feelings about this book because I did like it. I liked it more towards the end, and I appreciate like the beautiful writing in this book, and it had lots of like profound things to say about relationships and love and sexuality. But I think a lot of it felt very pretentious to me, and I also feel like a lot of it kind of went over my head. There's a lot of cultural references to like things that I don't understand. A lot of like Greek things, or like philosophy, artists and all that kind of thing. I do appreciate some of what it was trying to say, but yeah, some of it just makes me feel a bit like out of the loop. Like I just felt a bit too dumb for this book. I don't know. I think I would benefit from maybe rereading this book or watching the film and then reading it again or something like that. Just because I feel like I've sort of missed out on a lot of what the author's trying to say. I wasn't fully invested in the relationship because of how sort of I felt like the start was really slow, and then all of a sudden it jumped to like 100. I wasn't like super rooting for them yet, but then when it got to the end I did feel a bit more like connected to the characters and stuff. But yeah, I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 because I did like it, but like I say, I just feel like I didn't quite grasp it as well as I wanted to, or hoped that I would. So I think I will watch the film and then maybe read it again and see how I feel, because I just thought I would like it more. I thought I've heard so many good things about it, I thought I would love it, but yeah, I ended up just thinking it was okay. It was worth the read. The next book I read, I own, and it was Black Eyed Susans by Juliet Heaberlin. Heaberlin or Heaberlin. Let me get rid of this sticker. Oh, I can't be bothered. I will get that sticker off at some point. I gave this book a 2 out of 5. I found it incredibly boring. This book is about a woman, I can't even remember her name, Tessa. This book is about a girl called Tessa who years ago she was sort of kidnapped by this serial killer. So she was dumped in a grave with 3 other girls, all dead, and Tessa was the only one that was alive. They thought they got the serial killer at the time, and he is currently on death row, and I think he's just had like an execution date, and there's this group who are protesting this guy's innocence. They don't think he was the actual serial killer, and they think that there's been a miscarriage of justice. So they ask Tessa to help them with their campaign to get this guy off death row, and she actually has started to believe that the guy who was arrested wasn't actually the serial killer, because ever since he was arrested she's been continuing to get these black-eyed Susans. So they were found in a field of black-eyed Susans, the girls. This guy's been planting black-eyed Susans for her like in every house that she lives in up until the present day. So she also sort of believes that this serial killer is still on the loose. So this book sounded really interesting to me, and it had fairly decent reviews, but I found this book so boring. It took me a fair few days to get through. It is like 400 pages. I think it took me like a week to get through this book. It's told in two perspectives, so we're following the present day Tessa as she's like trying to get involved with finding out who the real serial killer is, and we're also following Tessa in the past as she's been found in this field of black-eyed Susans and she's now having therapy sessions. But I found both perspectives so boring, because what I live for is like the dark, horrible details. I was expecting more about like her time in captivity with the serial killer and just more about what actually went on, but we just didn't get any of that. It was just these therapy sessions that I found really boring, and like nothing was revealed. Present day I also found boring. There was a romance that I really didn't care for. I just felt like nothing happened. It seemed like the kind of story where our main character knew more about what was going on than the reader and is just like drip feeding information. We don't actually find out that this guy's been planting flowers at every house she's lived in until like way into the book. If I could describe this book as a word, it would be meh. So yeah, I won't recommend this one personally. Didn't care for the ending. Was just glad to have finished it, to be honest. So yeah. My final two books look basically the same. Don't they look very similar? Or like they're written by the same person or something like that? Yeah, so next book I read was Playing Nice by JP Delaney, and this, oh, why does every freaking book have these stupid annoying circle things on them? Yeah, this book was really interesting. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5. We are following this couple, Pete and Maddie. They've got this son called Theo who's 2 years old, and then one day this other couple come to the door and say, our babies were switched at birth and we've got your son and you've got our son, so what are we going to do about it? It just made me feel a lot of things. I felt like it was really well researched in terms of what would actually happen if this situation happened in real life. So like the laws surrounding parental rights and having custody of children that aren't like technically your own. It just seemed very well researched, and I appreciate that, and I felt like I learnt a lot. I felt like it was such a scary premise for a book. I mean, as the title infers, both sets of parents agree to like keep it amicable at first and they try and make it work between them, but things end up getting messy and they become embroiled in like a custody battle type thing. But it's also like still very much a thriller. I felt so much sympathy for the main parents that you're following, Pete and Maddie. I felt so much sympathy for them. The whole situation was like really stressful and really frustrating. Oh, it was just like an awful scenario to imagine myself in. I was just thinking like, what would you actually do in that situation? I thought it was a really solid thriller. I liked the ending, and yeah, like I said, it made me feel a lot, and I think that's what really matters to me when it comes to books. If it makes me angry in a good way, or like makes me really root for certain people in a book, then I'm guaranteed to like it pretty much. So yeah, I thought this one was really good. And then the final book that I read in June was His and Hers by Alice Feeney, and again I really liked this one. So we're following alternate chapters between Jack and Anna, who are ex-husband and wife. Anna is a presenter for the BBC and Jack is a detective chief inspector for the police. This woman is found dead in this very small town where Jack lives and Anna used to live. In her job as a presenter, she's sent to this town to like cover the story. So Jack is now investigating this murder, and he realises that he actually knows the woman who's been killed really well. The ex-wife also knows her, and things, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot going on in this book, but in a really good way. I was hooked straight away. I was guessing the whole time, literally like up until the very final page. Also, parts of this book were like genuinely scary. It's very atmospheric. It's set in this really small, like sleepy town surrounded by woods, and there are some scenes in the woods which really creeped me out. Plus it also got a lot darker than I was expecting it to, so really loved that. I almost feel like I would read a series about these characters because I just really liked them. And yeah, I can't wait to read more of Alice Feeney's books because this is my first one by her that I've read and I literally loved it. So I think I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Oh, and literally all my predictions for how this book was going to end were incorrect. So I do love when that happens, but then it also makes me feel kind of dumb. And then when I was thinking about the ending, I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense. Like, I wish I'd have seen that coming, but I just didn't. So yeah, would highly recommend this one as well. Other things I've just read in my little journal that I forgot to mention. There are also like flashback parts back to when the ex-wife was a teenager and she was like friends with these people in this small town. Loved it. Gave me the teenage girl tension relationship sort of vibes that I love in a book, so I got a bit of that. There was also the odd chapter from the killer's perspective, which I loved because that really makes you think about who it could be and like you're just left guessing. And finally there was one part in this book where literally one sentence that was there just made me realise that I've been reading the first half of the book wrong. Like, not wrong, but you know when you just feel like you've been like really manipulated into thinking one thing and then like one sentence will just like bam, no, it's something else. And I was like, oh, I love when that happens. I love when an author messes with my head and like misleads me. Just love it. Like, as long as it's done in a good way, I love it. So that is all the books that I read in May and June. Hope you enjoyed this video and let me know down below in the comments what books you've been reading the last couple of months and if you've read any of these books that I've talked about before and what you thought of them. If you like this video, please give it a like and it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to my channel if you want to see future videos. Yeah, thanks for watching and I'll see you in my next video.